The broken ship and the giants. The night on Arc Station 17 was quiet, broken only by the soft hum of old machines and the distant echo of docking alarms. But in a forgotten corner of the repair bay, there stood a small workshop, rusty tools, metal dust, and an old coffee mug with the words, "Humans fix everything." Inside worked Elias, a simple human mechanic, wearing oil-stained gloves and tired eyes, yet carrying a heart stronger than steel. He lived far from glory, far from big fleets and commanders. All he had was his tiny workshop and the belief that kindness was never wasted. When the emergency siren suddenly screamed through the station, Elias froze. Emergency landings were rare, and only warships used that alarm. He wiped his hands, grabbed his scanner, and stepped outside. The ground shook. A massive shadow covered him as a ship, no, more like a fallen titan, crashed into the bay. Sparks exploded, metal screamed, and smoke filled the air. Station guards ran away instead of helping, shouting, "Not our problem. That's a Titanian royal ship. If they die, we die too, Titanian." The galaxy's largest humanoid species, known for strength, brutality, and pride. No one approached them. No one dared. But when Elias heard weak coughing inside, he didn't move back. He ran forward. Inside the broken vessel, lights flickered and sparks rained. Two enormous figures lay trapped beneath collapsed metal beams. They were women, giant Titanian females nearly 3 times his height. Their armor was cracked, their bodies bleeding shimmering violet blood. Their faces, sharp and regal, twitched in pain. Their breathing was slow, fading. Elias felt fear crawling inside his bones, yet something louder spoke in his chest. No one deserves to die alone. One sister opened her golden eyes and stared at him, surprise and pain mixing. Her voice, deep like thunder yet trembling, whispered, "Human, leave. Danger. Our father will destroy everything." Elias didn't stop. "If I leave, you die. I don't do that." The metal beam pinning the older sister weighed tons. It was impossible for a normal man, but Elias wasn't thinking logic. He placed a jack, pushed with everything he had, muscles screaming, lungs burning. The beam barely lifted, but enough for the younger sister to drag her sibling free. When it crashed back down, his knees gave out, body shaking. The younger sister, still weak, tried to stand but fell again. Elias caught her head before it hit the ground. Her breath touched his shoulder, soft, warm, trembling. "You saved her," she whispered, voice breaking. "I fix broken things," he said softly. "Ships or people." But then the ship systems sparked violently, signaling overload. A reactor surge. They had seconds. Elias didn't think. He moved. He dragged power cables, rewired burned circuits, and slammed emergency coolant pipes into place. Smoke burned his throat. Sparks scorched his arms. But slowly, the reactor stabilizer lights turned green. One by one, the explosion stopped. When he turned, both sisters stared at him, not like a lower life form, not like a lesser species, but with shock and respect. The older sister tried to speak, but her voice broke. "You saved us twice. Why?" Elias simply shrugged. "Because someone had to." The younger one's eyes softened, a strange emotion in them. Not gratitude alone, but something deeper. Something rare, something ancient. Before Elias could respond, a heavy tremor shook the station. Windows cracked. Lights flickered red. A massive shadow, bigger than anything he had seen, blocked the hangar entrance. The air vibrated. Gravity sensors went crazy. A Titanian Imperial Dread carrier arrived. The largest class in the galaxy. The ship of the Titanian Emperor. Station announcements panicked. "Emergency! Titanian Empire flagship detected. All personnel stand down." Elias's heart pounded as a colossal figure, armored in obsidian and silver, stepped onto the station floor. His presence crushed the air. His eyes burned like stars collapsing, and when he saw his daughters alive, standing beside a small human, everything went silent. The Emperor looked at Elias. Not with anger, not with power, but with something impossible to understand. Then he spoke, voice carrying power like thunder through ancient mountains. "Human mechanic, what do you desire in return for saving the blood of my throne?" The sisters stared too, breath held, eyes wide. Elias didn't know what to say. He didn't know his answer would change the fate of empires, and he had no idea that some people in the shadows wanted him dead before he could speak, because a human was never meant to save Titanian royalty and certainly not meant to gain the Emperor's favor, the Emperor's judgment, and the new threat. The hangar felt like time itself had frozen, every eye locked on the towering Titanian Emperor as he stood before the small human who had dared to save his daughters. His armor was polished obsidian, etched with golden runes that glowed faintly, symbols of an empire forged in war and bound by unbreakable tradition. Each step he took sent tiny vibrations through the metal floor, like a mountain learning how to walk. Soldiers and station workers fell to their knees, trembling, afraid to even breathe in his presence. But Elias stood still, not because he felt brave, but because his legs were too shocked to move. The two Titanian sisters, both still weakened but standing tall, moved closer to him as if shielding him. Their breaths were slow, their bodies still recovering, yet the fire in their eyes returned. The older sister, Zarya, tall as a steel tower and fierce like a storm trapped in flesh, rested a hand on her side where the wound still glowed faintly beneath her armor. The younger one, Lyra, whose eyes shimmered with warmth and hidden strength, watched Elias with an expression no one in the galaxy had ever seen a Titanian royal wear for a human: concern. The Emperor's gaze shifted, slowly from his daughters to Elias. It felt like staring into a collapsing star, something ancient, powerful, and terrifying to witness. "You repaired my bloodline," he said, voice deep enough to shake dust from the ceiling. "You did what no Titanian warrior, no royal doctor, no machine could do." He paused, his massive gauntlet flexing. "Why?" Elias swallowed, his throat dry like cracked metal. His heart hammered in his chest, loud enough he swore the others could hear it. Because they needed help," he answered, voice small but steady. "And no one else came." A silence followed so heavy it almost crushed the room. The Emperor studied him, as if trying to decide whether humanity had just earned honor or committed a sacred crime. "Weak species help for survival," the Emperor murmured. "Powerful ones act for purpose." His eyes burned like twin suns. "Which are you, human?" Elias forced himself to look into those blazing eyes, not in arrogance, but in quiet truth. "Maybe humans don't fit your categories," he said softly. "Sometimes we fix what's broken simply because it shouldn't stay broken." The words hung in the air like a blade suspended by fate. Then something impossible happened. The Emperor's lips moved, not into a smile, not into a snarl, but into a faint expression of acknowledgement. "Your heart is reckless," he said, "and dangerously pure." Before Elias could even process the meaning, a distant explosion rocked the station. Red alarms flashed. Metal shutters slammed down. Command screens lit up with warnings. "Unauthorized boarding detected." Multiple power surges in bay. Unknown cloaked operatives. Station security scrambled, shouting orders. Titanian guards drew energy spears. Lyra's eyes widened. She recognized the sound. "Father, assassins," she whispered fiercely. "The Council sent them." The Emperor's gaze darkened with fury. "They would dare?" Another explosion thundered through the hangar wall, shattering steel panels. Smoke erupted. Out of the haze emerged armored figures in sleek stealth suits, not Titanian, not human. Their armor bore sigils forbidden in civilized space, the mark of the Void Syndicate, a shadow empire feared for eliminating royal bloodlines. Their leader pointed a pulse rifle at Elias. "That human mechanic dies. He altered the future when he saved them. The prophecy must remain unbroken." Before Elias could even blink, Zarya stepped forward like a living fortress, her massive armored hand lifting to shield him. "To harm him," she growled, "is to challenge Titanian royalty." Lyra moved beside her, stance ready, voice sharp like ice-cutting stone. Touch him, and you die screaming. The syndicate assassins fired. Blinding plasma rounds streaked through the air. Elias flinched, but instead of pain, he felt a massive gust of force. The Emperor's palm slammed into the ground, releasing a shockwave that ripped through the assassins like a hurricane of raw gravity. The floor cracked like fragile glass beneath his power. Instead of falling back, the intruders dug in, armor glowing as they countercharged. Chaos exploded. Titans roared. Steel shattered. Sparks filled the air. Elias ducked behind a console, heart racing, watching gods and demons clash above him. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to hide, to survive. But then he saw Lyra stumbling as plasma struck near her. Something inside him snapped. He grabbed a heavy electromagnetic wrench and sprinted forward, adrenaline replacing fear. A syndicate soldier aimed at Lyra's chest, too close, too fast. Elias didn't think, didn't hesitate. He slammed the wrench against the soldier's helmet. The shockwave pulsed. Metal cracked. The assassin collapsed, armor flickering. Breathing hard, Elias stared at the fallen enemy, stunned by his own action. Lyra turned toward him slowly, disbelief in her eyes. "You protected me," she whispered. Tiny, foolish, brave human. For the first time, a Titanian princess looked at a human not as prey, not as lesser, but as equal in courage. And even in battle chaos, a spark ignited between them. One fragile, forbidden, and dangerous enough to reshape empires. The Emperor unleashed another devastating strike, golden energy erupting around him like a sun being born. One by one, the assassins fell. The survivors retreated into smoke, vanishing as suddenly as they appeared. Silence returned, thick, heavy, trembling. The Emperor turned to Elias again. "When you saved them, you stepped into the game of kings and shadows. Now the galaxy will hunt you." Elias stood shaking, bruised, exhausted, still gripping the wrench. "Then I'll keep fixing things," he breathed, "including myself." This time, the Emperor did smile, cold, proud, dangerous. "Human, tomorrow I return, and I do not arrive empty-handed." Zarya's voice came calm, but firm. "Rest tonight, Elias. Tomorrow your life will not be the same." Lyra looked at him long, quietly, something deep and unspoken in her gaze. "And neither will ours." Elias felt it then, the shift. A mechanic yesterday, a protector today, and tomorrow, something far greater. But greater also meant peril, because power always paints a target, especially on those who never asked for it, and in the shadows of the hangar ceiling, unseen eyes watched him, eyes that hated humans, eyes planning the next move before dawn arrived with destiny. Night before destiny. Secrets in the dark. The hangar slowly returned to normal, but nothing in Elias's world felt normal anymore. The Emperor's footsteps had faded. The Titanian dread carrier had vanished into the void like a mythical beast returning to its mountain, and the panic alarms had died into a low hum. Yet Elias's heart still beat like a hammer in a forge, shaping something new, something dangerous, and something irreversible inside him. The station engineers tiptoed back into the bay, whispering nervously, staring at Elias as if he had turned into a cosmic anomaly. A human had stood between an emperor and assassins and lived. No one knew whether to salute him, fear him, or avoid him altogether. Zarya walked forward, her gigantic steps shaking dust from the ceiling. Her body was still recovering, armor scratched, violet blood dried along the edges, but her posture held unshakable dignity. "You should rest," she said in her deep, commanding tone. "Tomorrow the Empire returns. Titanian tradition is clear. You saved royal life. Debt must be repaid." Her words sounded like a law older than stars themselves. Elias nodded, though his mind spun like broken gears. I don't even know what that means." Zarya's massive hand landed gently on his shoulder, the smallest motion for her, but it felt like the weight of a vow. "You will learn." Lyra approached then, softer, quieter, yet carrying a storm in her eyes. Unlike Zarya's steady aura, Lyra's presence carried a warm but unpredictable energy, like fire that both comforted and burned. "You should eat," she murmured, kneeling so her face was closer to him. Even kneeling, she towered over him like a living monument. "Humans are fragile. Your muscles tremble." Elias tried to laugh, but only a weak breath escaped. "I almost died." "So, yes, they do." Lyra's eyes flicked to the wrench still in his grip. "Yet you ran toward danger. Toward me." He looked away, embarrassed. "I just didn't want to lose anyone else today." For a heartbeat, something wordless passed between them. Gratitude, respect, and something even more forbidden. Zarya cleared her throat sharply, almost like catching something she didn't want to see. "We will stay nearby. For your safety." Elias didn't argue. He didn't have the strength to. He walked back to his workshop, each step heavy, lungs aching, sweat cooling into a chill. His small workshop felt different now. The same rusty tools, the same dented lockers, but somehow it no longer felt like just a mechanic's corner. It felt like the first piece of a story that would shake galaxies. He collapsed onto his makeshift bed, not bothering to remove his boots. His mind replayed the day in fragments. Sparks, smoke, giant sisters bleeding and gasping, assassins firing, the Emperor's voice echoing through his bones. He whispered to the darkness, half asleep already. "What did I just get myself into?" Sleep hit him like gravity. But peace did not follow. It was deep night when Elias woke again, not to alarms, not to danger, but to silence. A heavy, unnatural silence that felt too still. He blinked, eyes adjusting to the faint workshop lights. Something massive stood near the door, silhouetted against the dim glow. He jolted upright, heart racing, until the shape moved, and moon-blue eyes stared softly at him. It was Lyra. She wasn't in armor now. She wore a simple titanium cloak, dark fabric flowing around her like starlight shadows. Without the battle gear, her features appeared almost gentle, still powerful, still alien, but strangely human in her exhaustion. She didn't speak at first. She simply sat beside his bed, knees bent, each movement controlled, cautious, as though she feared breaking something in the fragile world around her. Even sitting, she towered over him. "You shouldn't sneak up on sleeping humans," Elias whispered. "We aren't built for that kind of heart attack." Her lips curved slightly, the smallest hint of a tired smile. "I did not want to disturb you, but I could not sleep." He sat up, rubbing his eyes. "Nightmares?" "Memories," she corrected softly. "When we crashed, I thought that would be our end. Titanian royals do not die quietly. We are expected to fall in war, not bleed on cold steel and wait for fate." She paused, voice trembling despite her strength. "But fate sent you." Elias looked down, words caught in his throat. "Anyone would have helped." "No," she said immediately, shaking her head. "Others ran. Others hid. Only you stayed." The space between them filled with a quiet that felt heavy but warm. Not awkward, but meaningful. After a long pause, Lyra spoke again, almost in a whisper. "When a Titanian owes life, it binds us. Our people say it ties spirits. A bond beyond command, beyond duty." "That sounds intense," Elias breathed. "It is," Lyra replied. "And dangerous. Because bonds bring jealousy, power, politics, and death." She leaned closer, voice cracking with raw fear she didn't show in battle. "This bond will make enemies. Some will want to protect you. Some will want to erase you." He stared at her, realization settling like weight on his shoulders. "Because I helped you? Because you changed fate," she whispered. "Because you touched the untouchable." Outside, distant footsteps echoed, Zarya patrolling like a living wall of steel. Lyra turned her head and then looked back at him, eyes serious. "Sleep, Elias. Tomorrow a new life begins. Be strong, be human." She stood slowly, cloak flowing like liquid night, but before she left she paused, looking at him one last time. "And thank you for saving my sister." Then she vanished into the shadows. Elias lay back again, staring at the ceiling. He didn't know whether he should be proud, terrified, or both. A mechanic yesterday, a protector today, tomorrow, something else entirely. And in the silent dark, somewhere very far beyond the station walls, political storms gathered and ancient traditions awakened, all because one simple human refused to walk away. The galaxy had just taken its first breath before the storm, and Elias heard the wind coming. The Emperor's offer, and the price of honor dawn on Arc Station 17 did not rise with sunlight, because there was no sun here, only the cold. Endless stretch of vacuum and distant stars, but still the station felt like dawn. Fresh tension filled every corridor like the universe itself holding its breath. Engineers lined up stiffly, soldiers in perfect formation, civilians forced away from windows for their own safety. The station was silent, reverent, terrified, because today the Titanian Emperor was returning, and everyone knew this was not a normal visit. Elias stood in front of his workshop, uniform half-zipped and hands trembling slightly. He had cleaned himself up as best as his humble supplies allowed, but compared to the polished metal floors, ceremonial banners, and shining armor of Titanian soldiers, he looked painfully ordinary. Just a mechanic with grease under his nails and hope under his ribs. A fragile being who never belonged near royalty or war. Yet the universe had decided otherwise. Heavy metallic footsteps echoed, Zarya and Lyra appeared. Today they wore ceremonial titanian armor, repaired overnight but still scarred, each dent a reminder of the battle that should have killed them. Despite their towering presence, their eyes carried warmth when they saw him. "You didn't run," Zarya said quietly, almost sounding impressed. "Most beings would flee before facing an emperor twice." "I don't run from situations I created," Elias answered gently. Lyra stared at him longer than necessary, gaze deep, unreadable. "You did not create this," she said softly. "You were simply brave," he smiled faintly. "That sounds like a polite way to say I am dumb." "Courage and foolishness are siblings," Lyra replied, eyes shining. "Sometimes they share the same face." Before Elias could respond, a humming tremor shook the atmosphere like gravity bowing. A colossal shadow darkened the bay. The Titanian dread carrier arrived again, descending slowly, dignified, unstoppable, like a floating throne of war forged by a god. The hangar lights dimmed as it towered above the station. Shields shimmered. Thousands of micro-drones took formation like silver birds. The Emperor's personal guard emerged first, 10 titans in black and crimson armor, silent as judgment. Then he came. The Titanian Emperor stepped forward, cloak flowing, his presence bending the very air. His gaze locked onto Elias instantly, not wandering, not hesitant, as if Elias alone mattered in this room full of trembling beings. He approached until his shadow covered the human completely. Elias forced himself to stand tall, hands steady at his sides. He refused to bow, he simply stood, not as a challenge but as a human who wouldn't break. Silence gripped the hangar. Then the Emperor spoke, voice deep as cosmic thunder. "Human, mechanic, Elias of soul, step forward." Elias took a breath and obeyed. "You saved my daughters," the Emperor continued. "You protected royal blood. You faced assassins, and you did not falter." The room felt like it held 1,000 silent storms. In our culture, such an act demands repayment. Titanian law states that a life debt of royalty can only be answered in 3 ways. Zarya and Lyra stiffened. This was no ordinary ritual. 1. Wealth beyond measure. A massive armored chest slid forward, opening. Golden crystals and star ore pulsed like captured suns. Enough to buy a moon. Enough to build empires. Gasps filled the hangar. Elias stared, stunned. Riches he couldn't even name, glittering like eternity. 2. Protection of the crown. A ceremonial spear was presented. "Accept this, and no one in the Empire may harm you. You would be considered royal guarded, your name etched in Titanian honor halls." Elias felt a weight settle on him. safety, but a golden cage. Then the Emperor's eyes narrowed. Voice shifting lower, deeper, 3. A bond. The air froze. Lyra's breath stopped. Zarya's eyes widened with shock. A bond? Elias asked, confused. A royal bond, Zarya whispered. A sacred link for life. Honor beyond titles. Loyalty beyond blood. A place among us, the Emperor nodded. A bond means you become kin of the throne. Protected, respected, watched. You walk where titans walk. You share our destiny. Lyra looked down, jaw tight, hands clasped, as if bracing for something too heavy to hold. Choose, the Emperor commanded. Wealth, protection, or the bond. Elias felt thousands of eyes stabbing into his spine. The weight of a galaxy sat on his shoulders. He could take the treasure, disappear back to a quiet life. He could take the protection, live safe but forever in someone's shadow. Or he could choose the bond, whatever future that meant. He thought of the destroyed ship, the fear in Lyra's voice last night, the assassins who already hunted him, the way Zarya stood like a shield, the Emperor's lonely, ancient gaze. He whispered, voice steady, I don't want wealth. I don't want protection. The room exploded with murmurs. Titanian soldiers froze, stunned. I didn't help them for reward. I helped them because it was right. The Emperor's eyes narrowed, unreadable. Zarya exhaled slowly, tension shifting into something reverent. Lyra's lips parted slightly, hope flickering like dawn through clouds. So what do you choose? Elias lifted his head. If a life debt must be answered, then I choose the bond. Gasps thundered through the hall. The Emperor's expression changed. Not anger, not pride, but something raw, something ancient and shaken. But at that very moment, a gunshot cracked. A scream followed. A soldier fell, blood spraying. Chaos erupted. A sniper shot had entered the station, aimed not at the Emperor, but at Elias. The Emperor snarled, Zarya lunged, Lyra screamed, and the mechanics world exploded into another storm of death. Somewhere in the rafters, a cloaked figure whispered into a transmitter. The human chose the bond. He becomes a threat. Eliminate immediately. The hunt had truly begun. And now Elias was no longer just a mechanic. He was someone powerful forces wanted erased from existence. Blood Oath and the mark of the Titan's chaos exploded the moment the sniper's shot cracked through the air. Sparks erupted from the sealed doors on the upper deck. Alarms wailed like dying machines, and stunned shock rippled through the Titanian ranks as one of their elite guards fell, armor pierced by a microscopic quantum round. The crowd panicked. Engineers ducked, soldiers shouted orders, but amidst all that madness, Elias didn't move. Not because he was fearless, but because shock and reality collided inside him until his body forgot how to react. The shot wasn't meant for the soldier. It was meant for him. And for the first time since this madness began, Elias truly understood. Someone powerful, someone hidden, someone in the shadows of alien politics wanted him dead, not because he saved 2 alien sisters, but because he dared to be seen beside them, because he dared to change fate. The Titanian Emperor reacted first, his arm flashing with black energy as he sent a shockwave upward, ripping the upper balcony apart in a blast of pure gravitational force. Metal shrieked. Lights burst. Assassins cloaked in liquid armor dropped down like falling shadows, each one landing with deadly precision. Their weapons shimmered, blades designed to pierce titanian bone. Their movements were too smooth, too practiced. They were not simple killers. They were trained execution ghosts of the Outer Syndicate, the kind who erased threats quietly, the kind who never missed a target. Zarya launched forward, her armored gauntlet smashing into the ground so hard the shock knocked 2 assassins off balance. Her voice roared across the station like thunder. They aim for him. Protect the bond candidate. Lyra moved faster than thought, her long hair whipping behind her like a comet tail as she threw herself in front of Elias. her body forming a living shield, spear crackling with electric fury. She looked nothing like the shy, vulnerable figure who whispered in his workshop hours ago. She was now a storm made flesh, eyes blazing with a fire that no empire could tame. Elias, trembling, finally dropped to his knees as a blade flew past his head, slicing a line across his cheek. Warm blood slid down his skin. The smell of metal and smoke filled the air, and for a heartbeat, fear consumed him. Primal, suffocating fear. He wasn't a warrior. He wasn't a chosen hero. He was just a mechanic who fixed engines and believed kindness mattered. And yet, here he was, hunted by assassins because he saved someone. Because he refused to walk away. One assassin closed in, blade raised to strike. Elias braced for death, but a titanium warhammer crashed into the assassin's skull with bone-shattering force. Zarya stood over him, chest heaving, eyes burning crimson. "Elias," she growled, voice fierce but steady, "stay behind me. No one touches you." Behind them, the Emperor raised his gauntlet, and golden energy rippled outward like a wave of furious sunlight. Every assassin froze mid-motion, suspended by invisible force, gasping as gravity itself crushed their armor. One by one, they crumpled, bodies powerless under his sheer will. The hangar shook, machines rattled, and walls trembled, as if the universe itself bowed when he commanded. But one assassin, far quicker than the rest, flicked his wrist and fired a needle-like dart straight toward Elias's heart. There was no time to think, no time to hide, no soldier close enough to intercept. Lyra moved like lightning, grabbing the dart mid-air. It pierced her palm instead, sinking into her flesh. She hissed in pain, purple blood dripping, but her voice carried no weakness. She stood unbroken, hand bleeding, eyes locked on Elias as if daring the universe to challenge her again. For a moment, Elias forgot the fear. He forgot the assassins. He forgot the Emperor standing like a living god. All he saw was Lyra bleeding because she chose to stand between death and him. His voice cracked, barely a whisper. Why would you do that for me?" She looked at him, expression fierce but soft. "Because you did not kneel before fate," she whispered. "So neither will I." A heavy silence followed, thicker than smoke, heavier than steel. The Emperor's gaze lingered on Elias, unreadable, deep as black holes swallowing stars. Then, with a voice that shook the room, he declared, "By Titanian decree and by royal witness, the human Elias has chosen the bond. The bond will be honored. His life is under my protection." Titanian soldiers slammed their fists to their chests in salute, armor clanging like war drums. Zarya dropped to one knee briefly. Not submission, but respect. Lyra stood silently, breathing deeply, hand still bleeding, eyes locked on Elias with emotion she didn't dare name. A ceremonial chest was brought forward, not of wealth or weapons but of ancient significance. Inside was a small metallic band, simple, silver-black, etched with tiny runes that pulsed faintly. The Emperor lifted it with care. "This mark," he said, voice lowering but carrying absolute power, "binds you to Titanian honor. You are no longer just mechanic. You are honored kin." Elias stared, breath unsteady. "What does that mean?" "It means," Zarya answered, voice rough but proud, "no one in the Empire may strike you without invoking war. It means your name enters our history. It means you are not alone anymore." Lyra stepped close, so close Elias could feel the warmth of her breath, the tremor in her fingers, the weight of everything unspoken in her eyes. "It also means," she murmured, voice soft as moonlight yet sharp as truth, "that those who want you dead will try harder." The Emperor placed the metal band around Elias's wrist. Pain flashed like molten fire, symbols burning into his skin, fusing to bone. He gasped as energy surged, like electricity and raw life merging. The band cooled, then glowed faintly. And then it happened. Everyone in the hangar lowered their heads. Everyone except Elias. Because humans do not kneel easily. The Emperor watched him stand with quiet, fierce dignity and spoke one final sentence that echoed like a prophecy carved into stone. From this moment forward, you walk among titans. And titans do not break. But deep above in the shadow rafters, unseen by the crowd, a final assassin pressed a hand to his ear and whispered, voice dripping venom. Bond confirmed. Escalate to Phase 2. The real war had only just begun. Journey to the throne world, and the price of being chosen. The Titanian dread carrier opened its colossal docking gates, swallowing the station's light as if a god had opened a door into another universe. Metal groaned, engines hummed like ancient beasts awakening, and the air tasted charged, heavy with destiny, danger, and the weight of a decision that could not be undone. Elias walked between Zariah and Lyra as they escorted him on board, their towering forms casting long shadows over his smaller steps. The wristband, still faintly warm from being forged into his skin, pulsed with a steady glow, like a heartbeat, like a reminder. He had chosen the bond. He had stepped into a world where men did not survive. They either rose or they were erased. The warship's interior was beyond anything a human had ever seen. Giant corridors forged from living metal, glowing veins of energy pulsing through walls like starlight trapped in veins. Armored guards saluted as they passed, some with surprise, some with confusion, and some with disgust barely concealed behind ritual-blank faces. Elias felt their eyes, heavy and sharp, judging him, measuring him, thinking, how dare a human walk here? He kept walking, not out of bravery but because stopping meant collapsing under the invisible pressure. Zarya walked like a mountain that knew nothing could move her, eyes scanning every shadow. Lyra moved quietly, but her silence held intensity, protective energy, soft yet fierce. Elias wondered how long she had lived behind walls of expectation, born into power but caged by duty. Now, the two of them walked beside him not as untouchable royals, but as shields. They reached a massive circular chamber, the ceremonial Hall of Aegis, shimmering with symbols of the Titanian Empire's might. A curved viewing window revealed the stars, distant and cold, and at the center stood a pedestal of black stone etched with ancient runes. Titanian priests lined the walls, faces hidden behind silver masks, robes flowing like starlight. The Emperor stood at the far end, his presence so powerful it made the space feel smaller. He turned, cloak whispering like galaxies shifting. "It is time," he said. "The bond must be witnessed by the ancients and acknowledged by our laws." The priests raised staffs that hummed with cosmic energy. The chamber lights dimmed, the floor symbols lit with blue fire, and the air thickened with the weight of tradition older than human civilization. Elias's heart pounded. What happens now? The Emperor answered without emotion. To bond with titans is to shed who you were. You must face judgment. A cold chill crawled up his spine. Judgment. Zarya's voice rumbled softly. "Do not dishonor yourself." "Stand," Lyra whispered low and urgent. "Whatever you feel, do not kneel unless it is your choice, not fear." Elias stepped forward until he stood on the glowing platform. The band on his wrist flared, searing light shooting up his arm. He gasped but did not fall. The Emperor's voice boomed, not loud but vast. "State your reason for accepting the bond." Elias swallowed, thousands of alien eyes burning into him. He thought of lies he could tell. Honor, glory, repayment. But lies had no place here. "I accepted because I believe a life is priceless," he said quietly but clearly. "And because I won't let fear choose for me." A murmur rippled through the chamber. Some priests nodded. Others stiffened. The Emperor extended his hand and the platform pulsed brighter. "Then answer the second question. Do you accept the enemies this bond brings?" Elias thought of the assassins, the hatred in their eyes. The words erased the human. He thought of his simple life of tools and engines, nights alone with dreams too small for the universe. And then he thought of Lyra's bleeding hand catching a dart meant for him. He thought of Zariah shielding him like a younger brother she'd silently claimed. "I do." "Final question," the Emperor said, voice turning razor-sharp. "Do you accept that one day You may have to stand against your own kind for Titanian honor." The room went still. Elias' breath froze. Humans were flawed, greedy, chaotic, but they were his people. Yet in saving Titans, he had already crossed into a place no human had ever walked. Slowly, he answered, voice steady but carrying the ache of truth. "I will stand for what is right, whoever stands beside me or against me." The floor symbols flared white. Gasps filled the chamber. That was not an expected answer. That was a dangerous answer. That was a human answer. The Emperor's expression did not change, but something in his eyes flickered. Surprise, respect, even curiosity. He raised his hand, and the runes lifted into glowing threads, swirling around Elias like spirit flames. They burned, not as fire but like memory rewriting itself. Elias grit his teeth, pain stabbing deep under his skin, but he did not scream. Priests chanted. The Emperor spoke the ancient words. "By courage not born of our blood, by loyalty not granted by command, by choice against fear, he is bound." The light shot into Elias' chest. The pain vanished. Silence slammed down. Then the runes faded, leaving the wristband glowing like cooled metal. The Emperor stepped forward, placing a massive armored hand briefly on Elias's shoulder. "You are now bound to the throne, and kingdoms will tremble because of it." The ceremony ended. The priests bowed. The guards saluted, but not all celebrated. Far across the chamber, Titanian nobles whispered, frowns sharp, eyes burning with suspicion and resentment. One noblewoman, the High Chancellor, observed with cold fury. She turned, cloak swirling like venom, and whispered into a communicator, "Initiate the Purge Directive. The human must not leave Titania alive." Meanwhile, Zaria stepped close to Elias, voice low. "You spoke like a fool. A brave fool. Our world will not welcome your answers." Elias smirked tiredly. "I'm a mechanic. Thinking isn't my strongest tool." Lyra, beside him, whispered with emotion barely controlled. "Thinking is overrated. Heart is rare." Their eyes met, for a second too long, for a moment too human. Zaria looked away sharply. She saw what was forming. She knew what it meant, and she feared it. Suddenly, alarms blared again. Internal alarms this time. Red lights pulsed. Guards moved. The Emperor turned sharply as a voice echoed, "Unauthorized weapon signature. Internal threat detected." Zaria drew her blade. Lyra stepped in front of Elias again. The Emperor's eyes narrowed, fury rising like a star-going supernova. Elias didn't flinch. This time, fear did not freeze him. He clenched his fists. He wasn't prey anymore. He had chosen the bond. And fate had chosen chaos. The hunt wasn't over. It had only just begun. The human who refused to bow, and the Day Titans bled for him. The Dread Carrier's alarm thundered through sacred corridors, shaking banners of ancient victories and rattling armored statues lining the hall. Titanian guards surged into formation, weapons humming with lethal power. The air grew heavy, vibrating with tension so thick it felt like breathing molten iron. Elias stood in the ceremonial chamber's center, the bond mark on his wrist still glowing like a fresh brand. A promise and a threat fused into his blood. The Emperor's voice boomed across the chamber, sharp and commanding, a blade wrapped in thunder. "Find the traitors. Seal the lower decks. No one leaves this ship." Zaria immediately moved, her massive frame shielding Elias. Her expression was war fury sculpted in flesh, eyes burning with fire ancient as Titanian war songs. "Stay behind me, human," she growled. "They will aim for you first." Lyra stepped even closer, her hand trembling but her gaze fierce, protective, unwavering. "We stand together," she whispered more to herself than him, as if sealing a vow her heart made long before her mind accepted it. Suddenly, the lights flickered. Once, twice, then died. Darkness swallowed everything. The hum of engines dimmed to a low, ominous pulse. For a moment, the only light in the universe was the faint glow of the bond runes on Elias's wrist, casting ghostly lines across his face. A soft hiss, metal breathing. Footsteps, light, disciplined, precise. Shadows moved like liquid death. Silent assassins emerged from the darkness, their armor absorbing light, their blades humming with an energy that devoured life itself. One assassin leaped through the air, blade aimed at Elias's throat. Zarya intercepted mid-strike, her gauntlet crushing the assassin's wrist. She slammed him into the floor so hard the metal cracked like shattered ice. "Cowards," she snarled, voice shaking the walls. "Face a titan openly if you dare." Two more assassins lunged toward Elias, but Lyra moved faster, cloak whipping like black wings. Her blade flashed, elegant yet merciless, every strike a promise fueled by panic and loyalty. She fought not like a princess trained to stand behind legions, but like a woman who had already decided she would die before letting him fall. Elias wanted to move, to help, to swing like he did in the hangar, but the reality hit him again. These were not small shadows. These were trained killers. If he got in the way, he would slow them down. He could only stay at the center of the storm, heart beating like a drum of war. Across the chamber, the Emperor raised one hand. Gravity collapsed around the assassins like a crushing ocean. Bones cracked, metal twisted. But this time, something was different. Some assassins pushed through that unseen force, helmets glowing, bodies augmented beyond Titanian norms. Not just killers, rebels armed with forbidden tech. A voice rose among them, mechanical, layered, venomous. The throne grows weak if it kneels to lesser blood. The empire belongs to those born superior. The Emperor's eyes narrowed with ancient fury. Superior hearts stand with honor, not hate, the traitor sneered. Then your empire will fall with you. He lunged, not at the Emperor, not at Zarya, but at Elias. Blade raised. A killing blow intended to end destiny. And in that moment, something inside Elias shattered. Fear, doubt, smallness. He had spent his life fixing broken things, believing kindness mattered, believing courage wasn't measured by height or power but by the willingness to act. His feet moved before his mind did. He stepped forward, putting himself between the blade and the Emperor's daughters. Zarya shouted, voice breaking, "Elias, no!" Lyra screamed, "Don't!" But he raised his arms anyway, body trembling, heart roaring, breath steady, and the blade stopped. The assassin froze mid-strike, his body snapping upward as though an invisible hand yanked him into the air. The Emperor's voice came low, dangerous, cold enough to freeze suns. "Touch what is mine again," he whispered, "and watch your soul unmake." He clenched his fist. The traitor's body imploded in a silent burst of violet mist. Silence crashed down. The remaining traitors faltered, fear replacing arrogance. Elite Titanian guards stormed in, finishing the rebels with efficient brutality. Metal clanged, bodies hit the floor, and then, finally, only breathing remained. Heavy, exhausted, alive. Elias sank to his knees, chest heaving, heart beating like thunder trapped in ribs. Lyra rushed to him, hands hovering but not yet touching him, afraid touch might break him. "Why?" she whispered, voice trembling, eyes wet. "Why would you stand in front of a blade?" He looked up, sweat and dust streaking his face. "Because? If I demand others stand for me, I must stand too." Zarya knelt on one knee beside him, rough voice low, unsteady. Foolish, human, brave. It was not insult. It was respect. The Emperor approached, cloak swirling like a storm made of galaxies. He towered over Elias, gaze sharp as destiny. "Do you know why the galaxy fears humans?" he asked quietly. Elias shook his head. "Not because you are strong," the Emperor said. "Not because you are many, but because when others kneel to power, humans stand." A slow, ancient sigh left his chest. "You reminded Titans today what honor truly is, and empires will hate you for it." He extended his massive hand, and Elias, trembling, placed his smaller hand inside. The Emperor lifted him gently to his feet, not as a king lifting a subject, but as a ruler acknowledging an equal in spirit. From this day, the Emperor declared, voice echoing through the ship and beyond, let the stars remember, a human has stood among titans. Lyra finally let her fingers brush his wrist. Soft, hesitant, reverent, like touching a miracle, Zarya placed a massive, steady hand on his shoulder, grounding him, claiming him as kin. High above, outside the ship, the Titanian dread carrier turned toward the throne world, engines blazing like comets, carrying a mechanic whose life no longer belonged to shadows or scrap metal. A new future awaited him. Dangerous, enormous, unforgiving. But not alone, never alone again, and in the deepest silent corners of space, unseen watchers whispered with dread, the Titans have chosen a human. Prepare. The story of Elias, the simple mechanic who chose to stand, had only just begun.